Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on the LunaRecycle Phase 1 submission for the digital twin track. I'm Elisa Ferguson, and I work with NASA on the design and operation of this challenge. We're grateful for your interest in this challenge, and we look forward to seeing your solutions. Today, we'll provide some helpful background and tips for completing your Phase 1 submission to the digital twin track. We have a separate tutorial video that walks through the submission template for the prototype build track. That video is also available on the challenge website. In today's tutorial, we will review the timeline for Phase 1, review how to submit, walk through the submission template that you'll use for your submission, answer some common questions about the challenge rules and the template, and encourage you to get started on your submission if you haven't already. Of course, if you ever have questions, you can email us at lunarecycle@ua.edu. Before we dive into the submission process, we'll review a quick overview of Phase 1. In Phase 1, teams will submit a preliminary low-fidelity digital twin and visualization of their solution. Phase 1 submissions are due March 31st at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Judging will take place in April and May, and the winners are expected to be announced in June. Up to 8 U.S. winners will each receive $50,000, and up to 3 international teams will receive recognition. Teams can register for the challenge and upload their submissions at the registration and submission platform. You can access this platform from the Apply page of the challenge website. We've created a separate video walkthrough of the registration and submission platform, which you can access on the resources page of the challenge website. For the digital twin track, teams must submit several items: a presentation file in PDF format addressing the questions in the template, a link to a recording of the presentation where one or more people from your team walks through the presentation, a link to a visualization that represents your digital twin, and answers to questions regarding your net waste recycled calculation. The questions about net waste recycled should be things that you've already included in your submission document. We'll talk more about those when we get to that section of the template. Finally, we've created detailed instructions for both registration and submissions on the FAQs page of the challenge website. Our FAQs have expanded considerably since the challenge opened, and they should always be your first stop if you have questions about any aspect of the challenge. Now we'll review the instructions for the template. The template can be downloaded from the challenge website. It can be found on the Apply page and the Resources page. We've received a lot of questions about whether submissions can be made in various languages. Unfortunately, all submissions must be in English, and we will not be able to review any submissions that are not in English. The submission must be a presentation that has been saved as a PDF file. The presentation may contain no more than 30 slides. And the recorded presentation may be no longer than 30 minutes. Teams should address the questions in the submission template in their presentation. We encourage you to keep the section numbers from the template in your slides. This will help the judges follow your presentation, and it will help ensure that your submission is not deemed incomplete. If you include each of the sections and questions from the template in your presentation, then you can be confident that your submission is complete. In terms of formatting, the text on slides must be no smaller than 16-point font, and we recommend a common font like Arial or Times New Roman. Teams should use a standard size slide with a 4:3 aspect ratio. Finally, in the template, we've provided a recommended length for each section. These are expressed as a recommended number of slides. However, these are intended to be guidelines, not requirements. Teams may allocate space to different sections as they see fit, as long as they stay within the overall 30-slide limit. Now we'll turn to the actual template. We're going to skip over the instructions because we just discussed them on the previous slide. So we'll start directly with section 1 of the template. Section 1 is where you will include your team information. The last part of this section, part 1.6, asks for a brief description of your solution. Be sure to avoid including any confidential information in this description, as it may be used in public communications regarding the challenge. In the next section, section 2, has several questions regarding the innovative aspects of your solution. Innovation is an important part of this challenge, and we encourage you to be as detailed as possible in your answers. At the bottom of this section, part 2.6, is a question about how your solution will handle lunar dust. We want to note that lunar dust is not one of the environmental conditions that teams are required to address. However, we're interested in whether there are any aspects of your solution that might be resistant to dust. If your solution does not have these characteristics, that's completely fine, and you can just say that in your answer. The next section, section 3, is where you'll describe your recycling and manufacturing process. You'll remember from the challenge rules that in the digital twin track, teams must include the manufacturing of one or more finished end products in their design. So be sure that your design includes both the recycling process and manufacturing of at least one finished end product that is similar to a commercially available product. We also want to note that many of these questions ask for pretty detailed technical information. At this point in phase 1, your team may or may not have done all of the analysis regarding your design to answer all these questions fully. We encourage you to be as detailed as possible in your answers. However, we understand that your answers, analysis, and estimates may be preliminary at this point in time. That's completely fine. Now I'll walk through each of the parts of section 3. In part 3.1, we're asking you to identify the waste category or categories and waste items that your process will address. All the eligible waste categories and waste items can be found in Table 4 of the challenge rules. We also ask you to estimate the percentage of each waste item that you'll recycle and the types and amounts of materials in each item that you'll recycle. Let's explain a little more about that second part. You'll see on the screen here a portion of Table 4 from the challenge rules. This table is in the rules document, not the template. We added it here for this tutorial so that we could show it to you while we explain an example. So let's say your solution is focused on the fabrics waste category, and you'll recycle all 3 of the items listed in that category, meaning clothing, washcloths, and disinfectant wipes. But in terms of materials, you'll recycle only the cotton and cellulose materials in each item. In that case, you could explain that you will recycle 100% of the washcloths, 100% of the disinfectant wipes, and 56% of the clothing, because 56% is the percentage of cotton and cellulose in the clothing. This is the kind of explanation in detail that we expect in section 3.1. Moving on to the next part, part 3.2, we're asking you to identify the usable outputs that will come out of your process. These are the things that you will produce from the recycling process. Again, in the digital twin track, your design must include the manufacturing of at least one finished end product. It may also include commodities, fuels, or feedstocks in addition to the one or more finished end products. In part 3.3, we're asking you to describe the hardware systems and components that make up your process. We encourage you to include illustrations, schematics, or other visuals of your systems and components in your submission. Part 3.4 asks you to describe your concept of operations so that we can understand your production cycle. Please note that we are particularly interested in whether your process will require crew time and how much and for what activities. As you'll remember from the challenge rules, teams are encouraged to minimize the crew time required for operating the recycling process. Part 3.5 asks you to describe what maintenance you anticipate your system will require. Please be sure to note any crew time that will be required for maintenance activities as well. In Part 3.6, we'd like you to estimate the resource inputs that will be required for your process. We've provided a table that you can use to organize this information. Generally, you should include a resource inputs table for each waste category that you are addressing. However, as noted in the template, if your recycling process addresses more than one waste category simultaneously, you may provide just one table for multiple waste categories. In the next part, 3.7, we're asking you to describe any unusable outputs that will result from your process. These include any materials or substances extracted from waste items that are not processed into a feedstock or end product, as well as wastewater, excess chemicals, hazardous materials, or any other substance that is left over from and unusable in the recycling process. This is also where you can describe any PFAS or microplastics that might result from your process. The last part of this section, part 3.8, addresses your net waste recycled. Net waste recycled is a rough estimate of how much waste your solution will recycle. In phase 1, we've tried to simplify the calculation of net waste recycled so that the judges can have a sense of how much waste each team can recycle without requiring teams to do a lot of detailed analysis to get to that number. Instructions for calculating net waste recycled and several examples are included on pages 22 and 23 of the challenge rules and in the submission template. Of course, if you have questions about net waste recycled or how to calculate it, you can reach out to us. Also, at the beginning of this tutorial, I mentioned that when you upload your submission, you'll also need to answer a couple of questions about net waste recycled. The first question on the submission platform that you will need to answer is, what is your net waste recycled? Your answer should be a whole number. The second question asks for an explanation of your net waste recycled number. Your explanation should be a simple sentence similar to the example explanations on page 23 of the challenge rules. These instructions are also provided on the submission platform. Your net waste recycled number and explanation should be the same in your submission and for the questions you answer on the submission platform. Next, we'll move to section 4 of the template, where you will describe the architecture of your digital twin. We've received a number of questions about the types of data and level of fidelity that we're looking for in phase 1 of the challenge. But really, it's up to you to decide what data and models you want to include. That's why it's a competition. However, we do say in the challenge rules that phase 1 is focused on the design of a preliminary low-fidelity digital twin and visualization of the solution. So we do not expect that your design or your visualization will include everything that a comprehensive and fully functional digital twin would include. For all of the questions in this section, you should be as detailed as possible about both the architecture that is already part of this low fidelity version, as well as architecture that you would intend to include in a higher fidelity version. In addition, we've received a number of questions about whether teams should use any specific software to create their digital twin. The answer is that we are not making any specific recommendations for software or other tools. Teams are free to use whatever software they choose. Now we'll go through each part of section 4. In part 4.1.1, we're asking about your design approach to the digital twin, including the physics-based models and data that you have included or intend to include in it. In part 4.1.2, you will describe the level of fidelity and resolution and discuss how closely your digital representation matches a real-world system. As I mentioned before, you can also indicate areas that you have not built out in this version of your digital twin, but that you would build out in a higher fidelity version. In Part 413, you'll describe any data acquisition and integration from sensors and observing systems. Again, even if these are not yet included in this version of your digital twin, you can describe the data you intend to include in a higher fidelity version. In Part 414, you will describe any automated control and decision-making capabilities. And in Section 415, you will describe any AI or machine learning capabilities. In Part 416, you'll describe your intended approach to virtual prototyping and testing. If you've conducted some testing in a simulated environment already, you can include those results. If not, you can describe your expected approach to these activities if you are chosen to move on. In Part 417, you'll describe your approach to validation. Again, validation activities may be something that you plan to do in the future, and that's completely fine. You can describe how you intend to validate your models in a higher fidelity version of your digital twin. Finally, in Part 418, you will describe how you envision your digital twin communicating with physical assets in the future after those assets have been built. Next, we'll move on to Section 5 of the template. In this section, you will need to describe how your digital twin addresses 7 key characteristics. Some of your answers may be similar to information you included in the previous section. That's okay, but please be sure to address each of these characteristics separately and individually in your presentation. Also, it may be that this low fidelity version of your digital twin does not fully address all the characteristics. That's completely fine, and you can also describe how you intend to address them in a higher fidelity version in the future. The 7 characteristics are laid out here, and we give a brief definition of each one. They are accuracy, cohesion, flexibility, predictive capabilities, repeatability, usability, and verification and validation. Finally, in Section 6, you'll provide a brief description of your digital twin visualization. As I mentioned in the beginning, you will submit your visualization as a link at the same time that you upload your presentation on the submission platform. Your visualization may be no longer than 10 minutes. In Part 611, we're asking you to describe how the visualization was created. You may want to discuss the software you used or developed and the level of visual fidelity that you were able to achieve. In Part 612, you'll note what engineering data is represented in the visualization. It could be that your visualization only shows some of the data that you have included in your design, and that's completely fine. You should just describe what aspects of your digital twin are actually shown in the visualization. Lastly, in Part 613, you'll summarize what the visualization shows, such as what aspects of the recycling system we can see, and any specific capabilities of the digital twin that are shown in the visualization. Now we'll shift back to a final slide to review some key information. In terms of next steps, please complete your registration if you have not already. This includes uploading your executed team agreement and the required documents verifying your citizenship and insurance or financial responsibility. Your registration cannot be verified without all of these documents. You can find the submission template that we walked through today on the Apply page or the Resources page of the Challenge website. I know there was a lot covered in this tutorial. Many common questions have already been answered on the FAQs page of the Challenge website, so check those out first if you have questions. The deadline for submissions is March 31st at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That date is coming up soon, and it's never too early to get started on your submission. As always, if you have any questions about registration, eligibility, the submission, or the challenge rules, you can always reach out to us at lunarecycle@ua.edu. Occasionally, teams have tried to reach us through other websites and email addresses. However, if you use any other email address or website, your question may not be reviewed and answered in a timely manner. So please always use the email address lunarecycle@ua.edu. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and thank you for competing. We look forward to seeing your submissions in March.